Hey everybody, welcome to the Cybersecurity Defense Ecosystem. This series is about focusing on all the things that we can offer the cybersecurity community, particularly the MSPs and MSSPs out there. We've got Nim from Critical Matrix. I'm going to talk about compliance issues and some of the other things that he's doing to help MSPs to get into the cybersecurity game. And let's kick this off. Nim, welcome. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me, Julian. Very excited to be sharing some of the insights about data in today's session with you.
Right, let's just jump right into this, Nim. So so basically at the end of the day, right, compliance is this thing that everybody has to deal with, obviously, right? There's government's compliance, there is insurance compliance, there's a lot of things happening in the world, and it's now global, right? Um, most states have their own compliance issues as well. There's GDPR in the US, there's other things in Canada. So, and the reality is it doesn't matter where you are located, right? Global compliance regulations and issues do affect you. It's anywhere that you can be reaching, right? Your customer base. And so it's now a global issue. And so, managing this becomes mission critical. So let's jump into that, Nim, and talk a bit about how what's your take on compliance issues and how you can help these MSPs get an upper hand on this.
Absolutely, Julian. One of the I'm just open with some talking points here. What we forget is every industrial revolution was born through a commodity. And as humanity, we fought for those commodities through every industrial revolution we've gone through. So, in the early 19th century, it was, coal and iron. And, whoever had coal and whoever had iron was, the go-to guy or gal. The second industrial revolution in the 19th and 20th century, it was oil. And if you could discover oil and you could become an oil baron, I mean, you had established yourself. The third industrial revolution, which is like kind of mid to late 20th century, it was electronics. It was the power of the computing. And now here we are in the 21st century, the fourth industrial revolution. And guess what it is? Guess what the commodity is, Julian? What are we fighting for?
Data.
Data.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Data is the biggest commodity now here today in the fourth industrial revolution. And what we are not doing a good job of is understanding how to protect it for ourselves as MSPs, but also how do we offer that protection to our customers? How do we monetize this amazing commodity that we all have in such abundance, just for fun? How much data, Julian, do you think globally is generated per day?
I'm not even
Per
sure.
day, yes, per
Yeah.
day.
Are we going to exabytes or
We're going
petabytes?
exabytes. Yeah.
Exabytes. So I would say like 100.
Yeah, good guess. 675 exabytes of data per day right now, as of the numbers and computing powers we have access to.
Well, Nima, we're just talking about the exabytes that we generate, our company.
Yeah,
Anyway.
exactly, right? It is intense.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm passionate about talking about compliance and how it's not security. And then what do we as MSPs need to understand in terms of managing this data, and what is our responsibility from a compliance perspective um, uh, to ourselves, but also our customers? So the first story I want to talk about is I'm exempt. So, we all know that the largest sort of global data regulation that was created and it was born out of Europe. You know what that's called, right, Julian?
Yeah.
Take a
GDPR.
guess. GDPR.
GDPR.
Yeah, GDPR. And so when it came out, I remember conversations. Oh, well, we're in Canada. It doesn't, yeah, let's not worry about it too much. It doesn't apply to us. We're exempt. And the answer to that is not, because whether you're public or you're private, you're living in the jurisdiction or you're not, any organization dealing with data that implicates that jurisdiction of compliance needs to comply with the law's provision. It's pretty simple. It doesn't matter if it's Quebec Law 25, the California Privacy Protection Act, North Carolina's rules, or GDPR. At a global scale, if you're interacting with that data, you're responsible for governing it and protecting it in a certain way. So what are some of best practices here? So we're going to keep it very high level just so that everybody gets a very quick understanding. Governance. Compliance and data requires us as companies internally to have good governance. So if you're an MSP and you still don't have a designated privacy officer and you don't understand the structure of how this person needs to function, that's a gap. Cybersecurity management. So that doesn't mean we're running an antivirus scanner, we're good to go. Confidentiality, incident reporting. So how are you managing confidentiality? How are you managing incident reporting? There are processes in place. Now, the good news here, guys, is if you're able to produce this stuff internally, these could be as a service components, which can be modified very easily to be something you offer clients to buy and service them with. Biometric data. This is sensitive whether you're in France, Germany, Canada, the US. There are some very specific policies around biometric information. What's biometrics? Are you scanning my retina? Are you scanning my fingerprint? Using facial recognition? Windows Hello is a form of biometric authentication. Using Windows Hello, you need to now consider how is that endpoint being protected and managed, and the information associated with that being protected and managed as well. Privacy impact assessments. Regardless of biometric data, are you conducting them across your organization? And obviously, if you're an organization or your customers have research data on various identifiable subjects of this research. Some of us provide services to health organizations. Some of us have a research R&D team in our company that is coming up with technology solutions, that is doing research in security. And so if we're doing any sort of information collection and management, there's rules in terms of how we have to govern.
Yeah, I want to double click on just one thing you said there, which is kind of cool. I didn't really get it until now, actually. You said, these organizations, these MSPs should go through this exercise for themselves, right? And,
Absolutely.
and by so doing, you're actually developing the skill set to help your customers and monetize this, right? So
100%.
it's not just like, let me just do this because it's, I just got to do it, right? But when you're doing it, if you did it right and you documented this properly, what you're actually doing is you're setting up the blueprint, right? For how you can then go to a end customer, right? And deliver the exact same service and maybe put a, dollar value on it. So by going through this, you're learning how to do it for yourself, but also for your customers, isn't it?
Absolutely, Julian. All the MSPs that I help establishing their own compliance for in our firm, we also work on what was the opportunity cost to do this project and how can we recover it by helping improve our clients and offering it to them at a price. Because it's not just about, hey, I just spent 10 bucks, I need to go get 10 bucks back. It's about, listen, I spent 10 bucks doing this, but now I have a product that I could monetize at $5 each.
Right.
And I've gotten smarter and better, and I can now offer this to people and add value.
Yeah,
That excites us a lot.
because at the end of the day, your end customer has got to go through this journey as well, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just you, right, as an MSP. So you do it once, do it right once, pull it together, then you can you can resell this over and over. That's a really great point. All right, let's keep going.
Go on. I like to, when we're presenting this in the room, like to spend some time playing a game. Sometimes we ask people to raise hands. Sometimes we ask them to just think introspectively. Here's a really cool checklist. Like this is a tool. If you're watching this and you want to take a screenshot of something, take a screenshot of this because this is where you can measure how ready you are as an organization to become a compliant organization towards any of the frameworks that you're thinking of, and data management on a global scale? Do you have a privacy officer? Do you have a response plan? Do you do impact assessments? Do you have insurance coverage? Julian, a lot of people have insurance coverage, but they don't understand the intricacies of what that insurance coverage covers, nor have they understood their obligation in proving that they had certain components in place for that coverage to be able to kick in. And
Mm.
this is why the word review is there. It doesn't say you have insurance coverage, review it. Get on the phone, understand if what are the different scenarios that can take place, and are you covered for those scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and just to double click on the insurance issue a little bit, right? Insurance companies are not in the business of paying out premiums, right? If you're in Florida, try to get insurance for hurricanes and floods,
Yeah,
right? Read the fine print. This is included, that's not included. The problem with cybersecurity in particular, um, if you can't prove that you did something one way or another, right? That's probably grounds for you not to be paid, right? And then what do? Right?
yeah,
So you want to double check that you have the right coverage, and not, I guess it's not really making it a checkbox, right? Oh, I
different.
did my thing. I checked it off. The insurance company, the agent probably doesn't even know what he's talking about. She's talking about. So basically, yeah, you're covered, but covered for what, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, dig in and double check to make sure you are actually covered, right?
A common one that all of my MSPs get caught on is privacy by default. It's amazing at how often technical people in the organization all are admins to the organization. So from a threat vector perspective, it's not privacy by default. It's everyone has access to everything by default, right? Just from a systems and controls perspective. But now let's talk about information gathering. We've all got client information. A lot of our systems have technical designs with IP addresses and sometimes, credentials, which we shouldn't, but we do in documentation. And you look at who in the company has access to this. So I shouldn't be able to get access to that information through going after a receptionist or somebody with a level of privilege that you wouldn't expect. So method of least privilege and being aware of what data we're collecting and the purpose we're collecting it for and where is it being stored. Believe it or not, even though you hire a third party marketing agency, if they're collecting a list on your behalf, they're still representing you. You need to make sure you've identified why you're gathering their information, what you're going to use it for, how is it going to be used, how long is it going to be used, and most importantly, you've actually collected consent to be able to use this information. Like I get 20 emails a week from different MSPs and different software vendors in the IT space. Some of these guys I haven't talked to in 2 years, but I'm on a list and it just keeps firing away, right?
Mm.
So, what is the relevancy, right? Um, a lot of customers are also educating themselves on this because they've got internal lawyers or they've got their legal and compliance officers, if they're large enough, providing guidance on how they should manage their business internally. So then now you as a service provider stick out like a sore thumb when your stakeholder knows you're not following the rules. So this is the time to now smarten up and clean up and start implementing some of these controls that make you look a little bit more aware of how regulations have changed and also operating in a privacy by default or privacy first capacity.
And I guess sometimes too as well, even if you're a company, right? And so you engage a marketing agency or some folks to kind of help you generate leads or whatever, right? Um, it's one of two things, right? One, you have to make sure the data that they're collecting is being managed properly. But also, if that agency is sort of collecting your data, keeping it internally, and then leveraging that same data for another client, right?
Yeah.
That's bad for you in two ways, right? Bad for the compliance issue, but bad that you spent the money to recruit those leads, and the company that is that you've hired to do that is going to double dip. They're going to take that contact information, that list, build it, and then use it to, promote some other company, maybe similar, maybe competitive, maybe, in a certain, maybe the same industry, right? um and that's another, challenge as well. So I guess the key is, make sure whatever, outcome in terms of data that end customers are, or that you're collecting on end customers, are being kept, properly, right?
That's it. That's it. Absolutely. You know, um, we've never had to prove as technology providing organizations that we have permission. Now the law has changed. It's black and white. Data protection laws want you to prove that you have documented consent. It even fundamentally at a global scale, GDPR, CPPA, Canadian Law 25, not soon 27, all say that you need to have proof of consent, which means that goes all the way down to the fabric of the cookie that we gather. Most of our systems put cookies on the computer before we ask for consent. Some of our cookies are all turned on by default. So we ask them, hey, do you accept all cookies or reject all cookies? And when you say reject all cookies, there's still cookies put on the machine already.
Right.
So these are in the minutia, and all it takes is for one person, right? Like you can build a reputation over years, but in 5 seconds it can be destroyed, and then you're left, trying to pick up the pieces and build it back up. Let's avoid some very expensive mistakes. Um, it's interesting, a fun statistic that I shared at one of my other talks recently. About a third of breaches happen because of insider threat. But then 3/4 of that, so 75% of that 30%, was an innocent person who didn't know any better. So it was not malicious, right?
Mhm.
There's 25% probably, exiting employee or data exfiltration, whatnot. And so we have conversations with MSPs on a regular basis that, hey, you know what, I haven't been breached yet, but I think I'm in compliance, right? I think I'm really secure. And so this comes from a place of, but I haven't validated how compliant I am. I think I'm in compliance, right? But I haven't validated. And so these folks on the upper left-hand corner, uh, their risk is very high because it has not been confirmed, but they're assuming we're okay. And then there's a couple that have been breached, but they say they're in compliance and they weren't. So it becomes a reputational risk where it costs them a damaged reputation, the trust is broken, and the costs are very high because there's media investigations going on. You make it to the second page of the news, maybe not the first, and there are some fines, right? There are some costs involved with upsetting the regulator, especially if customer information or access to customer information, right? Let's look at SolarWinds, for example. I mean, that poor guy's in jail. So the regulators have a point of making example um, out of folks who don't um, stick to the law. And then there's a whole bunch of companies that say, yep, I'm guilty. I know I'm not in compliance. We have problems, but we haven't been breached yet. So you may still be liable. I mean, there still could be somewhat of a risk. There could be some fines. Um, but the risk is very high because it's a house of cards. All you need is one mistake and then it collapses and you could be at risk.
Yeah.
And then it's when these people that are not in compliance get breached. So now we're talking about the lower right.
Mhm.
This is where there's a lot of damage. And unfortunately, when you look at small businesses, especially in the MSP space, and small business, I mean, even if you're under 300 people, you could be deemed as a small business just in revenue size and number of customer size. That will put you out of business because one, you may not have access to your data. You may not have the capital to get it decrypted, released, and recovered. you've probably got it on the dark web anyway, and it's customer identifiable information. There could be a class action lawsuit, and now you've defamed your brand. So this is serious enough that makes you want to take a step back and think, how can I get better and how can I do better? Because it's a journey. You can't turn it on overnight. This is something that you make a what we've been doing is working with our MSP clients and saying, how do we make a conscious effort to gradually move that needle in the right direction? You have a business to run, but this is a holistic thing that you need to get better at over time.
Nim, I always hear customers always say, well, I haven't been breached yet, or I'm too small, right? I don't think they're going to come after me and stuff. And we've already know that the data shows that that's not true, right? But you can't really, fight someone, to make them believe something that they don't believe to that degree, right? But I would just like to say that in today's world, regardless of your size of your company, um, that thing called social media, right, can spread some pretty crazy stuff pretty quick. And if you're small, it doesn't take many people, right, complaining on social media to put a big dent into your reputation. So it's not, the size in this case really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, just a few people can tell 100 people very, very quickly that here's what happened, right? And
Absolutely.
all that information can fly pretty quickly with how people do reviews for companies, and there's umpteen different sites where you can post information with other companies and so on. And of course, even if you're a competitor, if you're a small company, you still got other competitors, and so they're on the hunt for anything you're doing bad, and so they're going to amplify that message as well and say, see, look what happened to them. We haven't, they may even be in worse shape than you are, but they'll say we haven't been hacked yet, right? And look at what has happened to them. So I just want to, put a little caveat here that says, look, folks, if you really feel that you're, too small to fail, right? Then, be careful, because you can actually fail much faster, right, than a company who has the money, if you will, the financial stability to maintain and repair these things. Now, I would worry less, but I don't take my word for it because I'm not a lawyer. I'd worry less about the government trying to give you a fine than what damage can be done to your social reputation, uh,
Mhm.
either by your customers or by your competitors. Um, I believe personally, I could be wrong here, but compliance is a competitive advantage. Cybersecurity is a competitive advantage. Maybe I'll go out on a limb and say one of the top competitive advantage, because if you're more secure and more compliant and more respective of your customers than the other folks, I think you have a good value proposition to proclaim and to use that as an advantage. But you know, I guess pay attention. It's serious stuff, right?
All you need is one. So you might be a MSP of 3 people, and you may only have 2 customers. But if you had I'm just using a random example, the Office 365 global admin credentials for one of your 2 customers in your technician's mailbox, and the technician got phished and got the bad actors got access to that email. Now they've got access to your client. And through that, if the client's information got breached and they got access to actual end customer data that the client sells iPhones to or medical devices to or whatever, that is all on you. So all you need is one.
Yeah, and it's the when you look at the numbers, right? It's kind of scary because in the channel community, if you can't really afford to lose that many customers, certainly not now, with the economy the way it is right now, and people looking to do more with less and so on. But yeah, button this down, right?
Yeah.
Because this could come back to bite you bigger than most things. So great stuff.
And
All
we
right,
have a recent example of this, right? Like let's look at the hospitals down in Southern Ontario.
right.
So they got breached. And when you kind of peel back how that happened, it was through a person involved with these hospitals using a non-hospital sanctioned email address and having credentials stored in it, which the bad actor was able to get to.
Wow.
All it takes is one.
Yeah. Mind-boggling. All right. Let's proceed here.
So really quickly, just to cover off here, this is, what is the legislation looking like in the U.S.? More and more states are becoming compliance aware. They're all, taking California's lead in terms of creating bills that get passed to protect consumer data and privacy data and health data. Colorado followed suit pretty soon, and so right behind California. And you can see there's a lot of states coming on board. And soon the objective is this is going to be all green. And as service providers to continental North America, we need to be aware of how these legislations are changing so that one, we can monetize it, we can offer products and services to grow our business in that direction. And two, more importantly, protect our own business, protect our own client data, and be safer. We're all in sort of in the data business. One lesser known fact, and I'd like to share this, is globally there are data transfer contracts. And these data transfer contracts across 71 countries are basically the data transfer border guards. They sort of set the rules of engagement of how information gets moved across the globe. Like, Paris, France. France looks at IP address as a very, very, very identifiable, sensitive piece of information. They won't allow that IP to easily leave their border. So if you're offering, transcontinental, transborder data center services, backup recovery, sort of solutions, you need to be aware of what these contracts look like and what those standards are so that we can follow them, right? Specifically, these are data transfer contracts in these 71 countries that affect continental North America and exchange of information with continental North America.
Yeah, you could see
Another lesson
this,
known.
you could see the spread, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like this is like even early days, if you want to say this, right?
yeah,
But you could see the whole, world map is going to be filled in eventually, because what's good for one is obviously good for another. There, and people are just trying to figure out, how fast do we do it, and how critical it is. But you could see the trend, right? It's
yeah.
spreading.
Data management and data compliance is going to become a topic of geopolitics because it is nation state security at this point, right? When you start looking at global adequacy and capabilities of data, there's 74 jurisdictions around the world that have, from a data privacy perspective, an external regulator or a form of government authority designated as oversight on defining what is adequate data privacy standards. So these countries have a group, or let's just say an entity, that is going to be stringent on how information exchange is managed with that region. And this graph specifically shows the 74 jurisdictions that have this assessment in place, which affects North America.
And Nim, there's a massive movement now, right, for data sovereignty, right, where
Yes.
countries are saying, "Wait a minute, we want to build and keep this data in-house, like in country, right?" And they don't want it out. I mean,
Yeah.
certain information you can't do it today, like medical information, your government information, certain things that's sensitive, right? You have to keep it, in country. And a lot of people are saying, I'm not sure about the public cloud. So they're looking at the hybrid movements or hybrid solutions, right? So they can guarantee in a way that this information sort of stays in country. So watch out, more regulations are definitely going to be pouring into the market soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is not really complicated. I think what the media does and what some other organizations who monetize opportunity here is sensationalize the risk and the fear factor.
Right.
But when it comes down to like, so what do we actually have to do? It's absolutely not rocket science. Um, I'm not going to go through each one of these one bullet at a time, but it's not hard to have opt-in. It's not difficult to be transparent on how data is being used in your company and where it's going to go and how you're going to handle it. It's not hard for us to say we as a business are doing continuous risk assessments and TRAs, and openly saying this is how information is used and managed and stored and where it's located. This is easy stuff to do as a business, right? Because all of that aligns to the rights. So the same rights that you and I as business owners want to provide our customers, we would like to receive as consumers. Because I don't want like when Uber got breached, I was like, okay, am I affected? I mean, I got a letter right here from MGM from the breach that happened in Las Vegas, right? So my
Right.
data has been affected, what happened to me, what link to click on, and data protection. But like, this is nice, but it's too late. Like the data already got lost, right? So it's not difficult to do some of these controls and implement them as long as we make a conscious effort that this is part of our business. This is fundamental as putting a lock on the front door. This is fundamental as understanding what personal physical security is to us. And this is the equivalent in the data world.
So then, and then with those breaches and stuff, they probably say, and we'll give you the first year of identity management, right? We'll monitor your identity, and then afterwards you got to pay, I don't know, $20 a month or something.
Yeah.
But then what ends up happening is the organization that they hire to do this, and you sign up to them. Now they have all your information. Now they're going to be spamming you to continue,
Yeah.
purchasing their solution. So this stuff is way out of hand. And I think a lot of the businesses are challenged by saying, like, wait a minute, if we ask our customers for all this information to jump through all these hoops, they're gonna look at me and go, well, I'm not gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
And they may lose that customer. So there's going to be a time that comes, right, when everybody is going to have to do it because AI is going to quickly identify if you're doing it or not, and then the government and people, the bodies that authorize these things, going to have a hunting list, if you will,
Yeah.
and they're going to go after you, right? Because compliance is going to have teeth, right? It's going to have a big bite, and the
It will.
reality
And
is,
I'm gonna take what I call this the quantum leap part of my talk, because like I really appreciate them providing 1 year of identity protection and 1 year of Cyber Scout for ID theft restoration. But this is because all of our data is encrypted using RSA-based encryption, or elliptical curve encryption, as it's called, right? But with the advent of quantum computing, there's a concept called store now, decrypt later. This 1 year protection is fantastic. But 3 years from now, the banking information that MGM has about me, or the identity information that MGM has for me that may be encrypted that the bad actor can get to, they're going to have ready access to it 3 years from now. And it's still relevant data. So compliance is catching up to the oops, so what? Now this is going to happen. But we are still far behind where we need to be best in class to protect data. So there's a huge gap that we need to cover off as technology service providers, as business owners, and those as evangelists who protect our customers' data.
absolutely interesting.
Cool. So that's all I had for slides. Happy uh, to answer any questions, Julian, that you think might help our
Yeah.
fellow friends in the MSP space.
Well,
We get to
here's
work
the
with them on a
thing.
regular basis, so
For me, compliance is sort of becoming like one of those must have now, right? And before it was a nice to have, right? It was a certain elite sort of organizations that did it
Mhm.
because they felt that there was a legal reason to protect it, and because they're governed by laws and all the different things, and and they're being a public company and a large company, then they have lawyers, and that's what they do, right? They button up every single potential problem. And now the world of compliance and regulations is sort of catching up really fast, if you will. A little bit late to the game, you'd say, right, Nim, right? They should have
Yeah.
been doing this probably maybe 5-10 years ago, right? So we all had a chance to sort of, catch up a little bit better, a little slower. But now, boom, it's on upon us, right? And the challenge is hacking and breaching is getting, more commonplace. AI is coming and actually making that even more commonplace, right? And therefore, there's going to be a lot more people breached before we get a handle on this, right? When you look at the compliance issues and just bringing the conversation back to the MSP world, right? I mean, it's sort of obvious, right? They've got to make this a top priority at some point. Maybe it's not number one, but it's a pretty close number 2 or 3. If you were to put this in perspective, how would you rank this as a priority for an MSP?
It's hard because you actually have a business to run, right? And you have other obligations and other investments that take priority. But I asked this question: what would happen if you could not log in the next day? What would happen if your customer said, "Hey, we got hacked. We think it's you." Because the blame game is always going to be there.
For
And then,
sure. Yeah.
what would happen if a regulator showed up and said, "We found this data. You've been reported by a consumer. We think you're not doing a good enough job. You have to now defend yourself." Right? So these 3 scenarios have me personally as a business owner have a weighted value of risk in my organization. And I do everything in my power to mitigate those from becoming a reality. Now, there's a lot of other things that need to happen, but compliance is a continuum, it's a journey. It's not something that you start today and finish tomorrow. So allocate budgets, set aside funds, and prioritize this to be in your top 3 priorities for your business. Because being compliant isn't just checking a box. It's about saying, I'm taking responsibility for the data in my company, the data I control, the data I create, the data I manage. Right?
Yeah. And you also got to make sure that you understand that, because when people get breached, it's very expensive, right, to fix this problem, which means they probably will engage their insurance, right? Which also means the lawyers from the insurance companies, those claim deniers, right, are going to crawl out of the woodwork and try to say, here's the 10 things that could go wrong. And they're going to turn the table on you, and you're going to have to prove that you did these things, right? And it's almost back to that simple thing when you go to a customer and they say, hey, I don't want to spend all this money for cybersecurity and compliance issues and so on. Hey, I can't afford it, right? As an MSP, what do? Right? You better have some kind of a document in a way that says, hey, you're saying you don't do this, right? You're not going to do it. So identify me so I don't have a problem with this if it happens in the future. And
Yeah.
even that simple act of making sure you're getting a sign off from the customer can actually encourage the customer to actually say, you know what, maybe we, instead of kicking this can down the road, we should maybe fix this problem now. So
Yeah.
any last minute advice on compliance issues and all the other regulations that's coming down to haunt us in the business world?
Parting thoughts would be, this is not, this doesn't have to be complicated. It can be broken up in chunks and managed efficiently. And reach out and ask questions, engage, right? I always say that, I approach these situations and our firm approaches these situations in a advisory first approach. So happy to sit down, happy to explain, talk about what a roadmap looks like. That first step is just inquiring about, what do I need to do? What do I need to know? Or what am I pretending not to know? And we'll go from there, right? Take that first step.
There you go. So if you want to reach out to NIM, of course, you can go to cybersecurity-defense-ecosystem.com, but also you can go directly to NIM. So with NIM, what's your website, by the way?
It's criticalmatrix.com. And
Right.
if you want to email me, just nim@criticalmatrix.com.
Can't
And
be easier.
look
Cannot
them
be
up on
easier than that.
LinkedIn or on the CDE.
Absolutely. All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you button up those holes. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you, Julian.